What's up? I'm Andrew from the band Rip to Shreds, and today we're here with...
Danny Cat, lawyer to the black metal stars.
We're here today because here you have a couple of stories about music contracts that you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick like a particular story to be fully exploratory about because it's kind of general concepts that I see when I get, contracts coming my way from labels that have no business writing contracts like Sony, to be really blunt. You got these minor metal labels like that might be owned by somebody, it might be a subsidiary of somebody, but they have, your standard masters ownership, and then sometimes it's 360 deals and ridiculous advances they know the band's never going to pay back. So they basically just want to own these albums in perpetuity and, I don't know, make bobbleheads of the band members or something ridiculous.
I mean, 360 seems really crazy when we're talking about, extreme, death metal and black metal and grindcore. If we look at the finances of the average death metal band going on tour, they're coming home with like pennies.
Right.
Like, how does the label even justify taking a cut like that?
A lot of these labels figure because they're investing so much, the bands are just going to understand. In the digital age, it's also different. You can definitely exploit things all sorts of different ways. Licensing isn't restricted to like television anymore or movies anymore. You can license to video games. So I think there's a lot of avenues for these labels to actually make money. But regardless, I can't imagine there's a whole lot of metal labels out there that are in the black on their like more extreme bands, Earache's a terrible example because that label's just shit most of the time. But like, I think Buck Cherry's on them now. Like, I'm sure,
it's crazy how they turn into like a butt rock label.
Right, but like, I'm sure some Touch Tunes in like Alabama or something has played Buck Cherry enough times to like actually turn some money. They don't have to worry about making money from the very little actual metal they sign at this point. And I think, another symptom of this is you see a lot of extreme labels that did like just metal for so long branching out because they have to make money some way. I mean, Relapse is a really good example. I remember coming up with the Relapse store right in Philly. That's where you went for like your black metal and your grindcore and things like that. And now you have bands that are like shoegaze on there, which I'm cool with that. I have really varied taste, but I think that's just, another way to make money for a lot of these labels.
Right. I mean, I remember, like, in the very early days, Earache was, like, basically grindcore and death metal only. And then, like, maybe the mid-2000s, that's when they got into, like, the beard and beer metal stuff with, like, Mastodon, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, that era, Relapse put out the early Mastodon stuff, and then they went to, like, Columbia or something. Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, it's all the same kind of stuff. I mean, you've been around long enough to see, like, the trends. You had, like, Mastodon and Baroness for a while, and, like, before that was, like, the At the Gates worship, and, like, all of these labels hop on, and I think that's kind of going back to the contract thing. That's why a lot of these labels have to do such exclusive ownership and, derive royalties from so many places because they took chances on trends that might have been a flash. And obviously there's some examples like Peaceville, they're reissuing a lot of stuff too. So I think that's also a big source that these contracts they wrote years ago still carry weight and they can still just reissue these classic albums that come back into vogue.
I'm sure like that Death Estate has got to be like buku bucks.
Yeah, and from what I know, and like I can't say too much, but what I know is that they are really determined to exploit every possible avenue. Which, I have my own feelings about that, the blend of making money off art and wanting artists to be able to live off their art. But the point is, they're really aggressive. I mean, how many reissues of the same Death album have you seen? There's got to be like 20 pressings at this point.
And it's kind of funny because pressing vinyl is much more like a collector's game rather than actually distributing music. Yep. The traditional avenues of distributing music are totally destroyed, right? CDs, vinyl are not like relevant for actual music consumption.
Yeah, and I mean, you got those Instagram pages that are just devoted to like pictures of records, and like then you'll see that same person on Discogs flipping it like 3 days later. Which, I mean, I got my feelings about that. I'm a collector, but I listen to everything. If I don't like something I buy, I give it to a friend who I think might. Like you were saying, the more traditional avenues of making money off music are blocked with Bandcamp and other streaming services. Like, bands also need labels less. So it's almost a little more amazing to me that other than the distribution network that, bands are even opting for contracts that are like 360 level.
Can you give any examples of like the types of bands that might have been offered that? Because a lot of my friends, were they're in bands at such a level that we get like relatively fair deals, right? They'll say, okay, you sign with us for three records. We give you like a reasonable advance. We quibble about the royalties, but there's like only so much we can do.
Right.
Especially now that, is it okay to talk about Prosthetic now that they've been bought out? Because I think they were particularly notorious for...
That's a label that's very notorious for doing that. I mean, I think that's pretty public, so any of my personal experience aside, like they're notorious for doing that. I think you see these 360 deals with bands that are either trying to make a comeback and like these labels know that like, hey, you know, there's some money here, but there's a chance you guys might break up again. So we need to make sure we can still like make money if you guys stop playing shows. Or you see it with like those flash in the pan bands. I did a contract for a band that was like poised to blow up back when it was like that cavernous death metal shit was like what everyone was listening to.
Right. So like 2017?
Yeah.
18?
Yeah, somewhere around that.
Okay.
I've been practicing for over 11 years now. So like that would make sense. They were known commodities in the band, like the people in the band, but they weren't like mega stars or anything. They weren't people that had like crossover potential, but they were enough to like make waves in metal. So, you know, I saw a 360 deal with them that was pretty ridiculous. And actually we were able to negotiate it really fairly, limited things, but you know, the label still walked away having exclusive shirt designs that they derived the royalties from. And the free goods deduction was in there as always and whatnot. And obviously royalties aren't paid as they come in. You know, standard.
Exactly. What does a 360 deal entail? Like, what sorts of revenue are the labels putting their fingers in?
So the easiest way to think of 360 deal is that it's every possible source of income. You know, you get your publishing, you get any sort of royalties from album sales, you get merch sales. You know, in the digital age, obviously digital downloads and streaming, that can all be included. Essentially what it does is it's all encompassing. So if there's any source of income, be it publishing or, you know, using the TouchTunes example, or somebody downloads off Apple Music or iTunes or whatever, it all comes back to the label. A lot of times, obviously, these bands have to sign like letters of direction or powers of attorney to make whoever is collecting the royalties give it to the label.
Right. You mentioned exclusive merch designs. I know maybe a lot of labels will say, hey, we want one or two merch designs, but we'll like split it with you 50-50 or something like that.
Yeah, so that'll happen too, but sometimes it'll also be after recoupment of advance. That's really the thing. The advance kind of dictates the situation a lot, because that's really where the 360 deal is going to come in, when the label is shelling out significant money. And while part of me can't blame them, you know, it still feels really predatory in a lot of ways, because this band's completely locked in with you. Like, you'll even see things where like they can't be side artists on other people's labels without like any income derived from that having to come back to the label.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, or like you'll have to get a permission slip, basically like a side artist permission slip, which is just fucking crazy to me. Like, this is metal, you know, this isn't pop music where like you expect this kind of industry bullshit. I guess as these metal labels get bought out or distributed by majors, they're going to adopt the same practices.
Do they also dip their fingers into shows and touring?
So I see that a lot less. The exception will be is if there's tour support offered by the label. That'll be a recoupable expense. On one hand, they're not directly dipping into tour revenue necessarily, but that'll be basically tacked onto the advance and recouped through the 360 deal.
Right. So we're talking like maybe advertisements for tour, or maybe they'll front them money so that they can rent their vehicles, or to get merch made, stuff like that. Okay,
cool. Situations like that where they're basically offering money to ease the burden of touring, because you've toured, you know, it's fucking terrible. So like as a band, it's tempting. You're like, oh man, this label's gonna like kind of wipe our ass a little bit. We don't have to worry about XYZ. We can just worry about playing music and sleeping on somebody's shitty floor. I can see the temptation. And I think that goes back to, you know, you asked who are the kind of people that takes this deal. You know, you're a new band starting out. You're riding a trend. You know, you have a lot of faith in your music. You're like, shit, we need to get out there, but that's not financially feasible. I mean, especially with how expensive everything is now, it's pretty tempting to take money from a label. And then you're like, shit, I'm not making any money off my music. It's all going right to the label.
Right, especially because it's kind of like an interest-free loan, right? At least I've never seen advances where they're like, we're going to put interest on this.
I feel like I have, but not in a metal contract.
Maybe like 50 years ago they would have done that.
I don't think I've seen that in a modern metal contract. I have done some, obviously, other contracts too. It can't be cool shit all the time. Sometimes I get really bad music and I have to be stoked on the phone call, which is not my favorite thing. You'll see labels that offer management services too. This is less of a thing in metal. It happens, but it's less of a thing. And that's where, you'll start to see a little more of that stuff. Like, all right, I'll loan you this money, but it's coming out of my pocket. So it's like interest will be tacked on. So that's a little outside the scope of the typical label advance situation, but it definitely is a thing that I've seen happen in that context.
Do you have any thoughts about what happened with Dragged into Sunlight and Prosthetic? Because I think that's probably the most public spat that we've seen regarding like legal matters with labels.
So my understanding, and I could be wrong because I don't know these guys personally. I haven't really talked to anybody in the know. And normally I refrain from speculation, but I'm doing this more as a metalhead that knows law than a lawyer. So I'm okay with it. Yeah.
Disclaimer, not legal advice.
None of this is legal advice. You can find me on the internet and pay me and I'll give you really legal advice. That my understanding is essentially that Prosthetic had the rights to the album. They licensed the vinyl to Mordgrim, which is a now defunct UK label. And basically Dragged into Sunlight was like, hey, everybody's been asking for this. This is our first album. I don't know if you saw it on Discogs before they reissued it. It was a couple $100. So they were like, hey, we want to reissue this. And Prosthetic was basically like, nah, we have right of first refusal. We're not doing it, which didn't really make sense to me because you'd think the demand would be there. It was funny for me watching Dragged into Sunlight, completely, no pun intended, drag them publicly. Obviously with defamation, there's a complete defense if it's true. So clearly their side of the story must not be complete bullshit because I don't even remember Prosthetic clapping back.
I think there were some like emails that they were having like a shit fight in the emails back and forth that got shown, but I don't think Prosthetic really did any more than that.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I remember.
Yeah, that's kind of how I remember it too, that like maybe they showed like screenshots of something that really didn't tell you anything except they weren't being nice to each other, which duh, like that doesn't really tell you anything.
Dan Seagrave, he's recently been, not recently, maybe the last 5 years or so, he's been going after Earache, right? Yep. There's like some really old work contract that he had with Earache saying that, they only had the rights of his art to use for the albums, but then like Earache is like, they're making puzzle boxes, they're making new flags and t-shirts and all this shit that was never signed over.
Yep, the Morbid Angel album cover was one that I actually spoke to somebody at Decibel about this a while ago. Like, that's just, again, a symptom of Earache trying to just make, get that bag at any expense, complete lack of integrity and going after the artist. I'd even heard that there was an artist, it might have been Seagrave, was doing like an exhibition and they were like, hey, you can't publicly perform because under copyright, one of the rights is public performance. And, in the case of art, that would basically be having an art show. Like, I'm pretty sure Earache was like, no, you can't do that, cease and desist, which is fucking crazy to me. Like, why would you bother doing that? So yeah, that's just another example. Labels just were generally predatory with everyone they could be. And, I don't know how well known and, how much of a commodity Seagrave was at the time he did that cover, because that was so long ago. So it's completely possible. It's kind of like what I was talking about, the young band thing, that he was just like, shit, Earache, they're the cutting edge of death metal right now. I can get my foot in the door, and then they're fucking them for it in the long run. I think always worth mentioning, and I talk about this quite frequently when I'm talking about like bands and labels, is that a lot of times labels are able to get away with this shit because they have deeper pockets. And like, that's just a true and really gross facet of doing legal work generally, that somebody has a way deeper pocket than the other. Like they're going to win. Like, I got a small business client I work with who is owed a significant amount of money for work he did. And like, he has a contract, it's ironclad, like he's completely in the right. But the people he did work for are like literal multimillionaires. And it basically said, like, you take us to court, we'll ruin your business. And bringing it back to music, there's two layers of that. One, it's the financial layer. And second is the reputational layer. Labels have power. If a label like shits on your band so badly and like holds your masters hostage in perpetuity, like they can ruin your band.
Bands are fucking broke to begin with. There's like, what can they even do, right? Do music lawyers often work pro bono on these, or is it kind of like, there's no way we're even going to get my feedback from this, there's no point in pursuing it? There's
been plenty of times that I really pride myself on being an honest attorney, which sometimes sucks for my wallet, but I sleep well at night. There's been times I've told bands that, like, listen, you're in the right here, and like, we might be able to do something if you had the resources, but frankly, like, it's going to bankrupt you. But I do quite frequently ask bands, like, honestly, what can you afford? You're not going to insult me. As long as they're not like $10, I'm like, sure, man, we'll make it work. Obviously, like, if I'm going to be taking a case to court or something, that requires a lot of time and a lot of effort. So, I can't be as flexible, but I really do everything I can. Understanding the life of a touring musician who probably has a day job that, like, doesn't pay super well either.
Are there many labels that you've actually gotten to the level of taking to court? Like, you couldn't reach a settlement before and you guys actually went to court?
No. There's been times that it's been very, very close, but I've been really fortunate. I really try to stay out of litigation. I hate it. I'm a little too uncouth to be in a courtroom, quite frankly. I'm a really good negotiator, and I've diffused quite a few bombs in that context, but when it comes to, like, actually suing a label, that hasn't had to happen yet. I have had to deal with PROs like ASCAP and BMI in that aspect, because they are just fucking insane in some ways and will come after people for the dumbest shit. They're also really good at sending preemptive bills, which are basically like, you're going to use our music at your event, so you should just pay us now.
Yeah, so let's talk about publishing rights organizations real quick. Basically, when you have a song, right, there's the publishing part, which is the songwriter's share. If I understand
there's correctly? Songwriter share and there's publisher share, yeah.
So you register the music with these organizations and they collect the royalties on your behalf?
So these are performing rights organizations, are what they are. Okay. And what they essentially do is any public performance of your music, be it you playing it live or it being using the Touch Tunes example, or even the context that I had to deal with it in that got litigious was, let's say you're booking a show or a fest, and you're going to play music over the speakers, that's technically a public performance. So every time you've heard somebody playing music in between bands, if ASCAP or BMI sent somebody in there, they could get sued, essentially, for infringing the rights. So the particular instance I'm talking about was, I think it was BMI sent a letter to my client saying, we've noticed you have this event booked. You've booked events in the past. You will for certain pay music that's in our catalog. So you need to pay us X amount of dollars. And it's based on, like, the capacity of the venue. It's good for artists because it allows them to pool royalties that they might not have been able to get access to before. But at the same time, like in the example I used, they can be predatory. Like, I've had people catch shit for their own songs through these organizations. Like, it gets really ludicrous. And I'm sure with, like, AI being more involved in things, it's only going to get fucking crazier.
Have you noticed how AI has been creeping into... So I watched the YouTube channel Legal Eagle. I saw this one thing where a lawyer made his entire argument using AI, and the AI just, like, created fake cases to cite.
Yeah, hallucinated cases. That's a good one. I love that story. Last I heard, that person was getting sanctioned. I'm not sure if, like, disbarment was on the table, but that's a serious fuck up.
Has AI started affecting music law yet, or not quite?
So I'm seeing clauses in contracts now about it, and authors too, because I do literary work as well. I've seen it basically say, like, publisher or label agrees not to use any of the content created by artist for AI training or anything like that. And I just worked with an author that was a very, like, when we were talking to the publishing company, we had a very strong stance, like, absolutely not, no AI. And, when I drafted the clause, I was like, and no new technologies anticipated or unanticipated, because who knows what's coming next.
Now that you say that, I realize I don't have anything in my contract
Most people don't.
related to AI.
And if you got rid of the master's rights, they could be well within their rights to exploit it through AI.
Shit, man.
Rip to Shreds is going to be AI. Hell yeah.
Is that, like, the most pressing frontier for legal work now? Just, like, trying to suss out what's going to happen in the future with regards to AI touching basically everything in entertainment?
No, I haven't seen too much of that. It's definitely... It's incrementally increasing. Like 3 years ago, it would have been unheard of, but the last literary contract and the last music contract I did had stuff in there about AI. Lawyers have to take something called CLEs every year, continuing legal education, to basically, like, keep our license. And if I see a CLE that's on, like, the intersection of AI and entertainment law, I do plan on taking it. Sometimes I just take, like, throwaway bullshit that, like, the time works. Other times I'm fortunate there's actually a class I care about. I'm sure you see it, like, every time a new album comes out. Is this AI art? Is this band AI? Like, all the fucking...
I mean, we have that fucking roses... Yeah,
Drogvale or whatever. Dude, the amount of angry virgins. And my favorite is there was this one guy who was like decrying it as AI and then used AI to like make a meme to make fun of it. And it's like, holy fuck, you have no sense of irony, do you, man? Like, I mean, but that's just metal for you. If they're not mad about one thing, they'll find something else to be mad about because they need real hobbies.
Metal is one of the absolute saltiest creative spaces.
Yeah, dude, it's terrible.
Do you find your literary stuff to be like in a specific genre, or is it just like kind of more general?
It's really all over the place. Like I've had everything from true crime to children's books, actually. Like for some reason, I've actually gotten a fair share of children's authors, which is kind of crazy to me because I know who I really am. And I'm like, if these people knew I was such a dickhead, like, would they still hire me? Like, I'm really kind. Like, I'm obviously not going to be shitty to my clients, but like...
Hey, but they need that dickhead to advocate
Yeah, I
for
guess
them.
so. You know, and every time I've negotiated a children's book contract, it's gone really smoothly. So I guess maybe you're right. They need the dickhead.
Give me your top 5 releases for this year so far.
Oh, Jesus Christ. The new Drug is really good. That band is always fantastic.
The sketch one?
I'm invoking my Jew pass. Whatever. They're on Season of Mist. Season of Mist would never put anything sketchy out. They didn't do Inquisition records. The new Croatian Amor, Lust for Youth, which is actually like anti-racist and anti-fascist electronic music. So, you know, some balance.
Hey, it balances out.
Yeah, balance out. I keep a list on my phone because I'm a nerd, and I am totally blanking on everything else. There's been a lot of really good music this year. I'm one of those people that like doesn't get jaded by new music. Like I'm always excited to hear new shit.
I like the new Caustic Wound a lot. I thought that was really sick.
New Tate and Blood. That's definitely up there for me.
Oh,
that album's crazy.
No, that's that. They play live, right? They're not a studio.
Yeah, I think they play live like very sporadically. I think they're like a fest band or something.
Have they come to the States?
I'm not sure.
No.
I've never seen them.
Okay.
The new Axis of Light, I really like that band. Also anti-fascist black metal. All right, I've redeemed myself for Dread. New Planning for Burial. Like it's really cool. Like
okay,
hard to describe what it is. I guess like shoegazy type stuff, but it's also really heavy. And Carrie's, that Finnish band, their new album is absolutely fantastic.
Okay. You got anything to shout out? I'm Danny Katz. These are my legal services.
Look for the law offices of Daniel Katz online. I've got a Facebook and a webpage and stuff, and I'm always happy to talk to people. If it's just a conversation, it'll never cost money. I have a rule that I don't charge people unless I have to sit in front of my computer, and obviously if it's just like sending an email or a phone call, whatever, it's free. You know, I'm always happy to give advice. I'm only barred in Pennsylvania, so I can only give Pennsylvania-based advice, but a lot of music law crosses state lines. That's why I'm able to do it, even just being barred in Pennsylvania. Obviously, if it's crossing state lines, it's federal. I'm barred, so I can do that.
Thanks so much, man.
All right, Andrew. Thank you.